Question 1. Quality control measures reveal that a U.S.-based financial services organization is migrating sensitive customer data to various cloud environments. The organization is utilizing infrastructure as a service (IaaS) for development and testing, platform as a service (PaaS) for a custom-built customer portal, and software as a service (SaaS) for its customer relationship management (CRM) system. The organization's Chief Information Security Officer (CISO) is tasked with ensuring that all cloud deployments meet stringent U.S. financial regulations, including data privacy and cybersecurity mandates. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance across these diverse cloud models? Option A. Relying primarily on the cloud service provider's built-in security features and compliance certification, assuming their adherence to U.S. regulations is sufficient for all deployed services. Option B. Implementing a comprehensive cloud access security broker (CASP) solution that enforces data loss prevention (DLP) policies and monitors user activity across all cloud services, while ensuring the organization's internal security policies align with the shared responsibility model for each cloud service type. Option C. Focusing solely on securing the on-premises infrastructure and treating cloud environments as extensions with minimal direct security oversight, as the cloud providers are responsible for the security of the cloud. Option D. Applying a uniform set of generic cloud security best practices across all cloud models without specific consideration for the distinct shared responsibility models of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, or the specific U.S. financial regulatory requirements. Correct answer is B. Implementing a comprehensive cloud access security broker (CASP) solution that enforces data loss prevention (DLP) policies and monitors user activity across all cloud services, while ensuring the organization's internal security policies align with the shared responsibility model for each cloud service type. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud security, ensuring regulatory compliance across different cloud service models. The professional must navigate the shared responsibility model inherent in cloud computing and align security controls with the specific requirements of the U.S. regulatory framework applicable to the organization's data and operations. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the responsible party for security controls within each cloud model and ensuring that the chosen security solutions adequately address the organization's compliance obligations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the organization's regulatory obligations within the U.S. framework. It acknowledges the shared responsibility model and focuses on implementing controls that are within the organization's purview for each cloud model (IaaS, PaaS, SaaS). This ensures that the organization maintains accountability for its data and system while leveraging the cloud provider's infrastructure and services. Adherence to U.S. regulation, such as those pertaining to data privacy e.g. HIPAA for healthcare, GLBA for financial services, and cybersecurity e.g. NIST frameworks, is paramount. A cloud access security broker (CASP) can be a critical tool in this context, providing visibility and control over data and threats in cloud environments, thereby aiding in compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cloud provider's responsibilities fails to acknowledge the organization's residual security obligations, particularly in IaaS and PaaS models, leading to potential compliance gaps. This is a regulatory failure, as the organization remains accountable for protecting sensitive data. Another incorrect approach that overlies on a CASP without understanding the underlying cloud model's shared responsibility matrix is also flawed. While a CASP is valuable, it cannot compensate for fundamental security misconfigurations or a lack of controls that are the organization's responsibility. This represents an ethical failure in due diligence and a regulatory failure in implementing appropriate security measures. A third incorrect approach that ignores the specific regulatory requirements of the U.S. jurisdiction and applies generic cloud security best practices is insufficient. U.S. regulations often have specific mandates that generic practices may not fully address, leading to non-compliance and potential legal repercussions. The professional decision-making process should involve a thorough understanding of the organization's data, the applicable U.S. regulatory landscape, and the specific cloud service models being utilized. This requires mapping security responsibilities to each cloud model and selecting appropriate security controls, including the strategic deployment of tools like CISSP to meet compliance requirements. Continuous monitoring and auditing are essential to ensure ongoing adherence to both regulatory mandates and security best practices. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to data lifecycle management, particularly when considering the secure disposal of sensitive information. An organization is evaluating methods for rendering data unrecoverable from various storage media before decommissioning or repurposing. Which of the following approaches best aligns with industry best practices and regulatory expectations for secure data disposal? Option A. Relying solely on physical destruction of media, such as shredding or pulverizing, without specific verification of data irrecoverability. Option B. Implementing a documented media sanitization process that includes overriding data with a multi-pass algorithm, or using degaussing/physical destruction methods validated against recognized standards with verification of successful sanitization. Option C. Engaging a third-party vendor for media disposal based on their advertised services, without conducting due diligence or establishing specific contractual requirements for data sanitization. Option D. Performing a single-pass override of data on all storage media as a standard disposal procedure. The correct answer is B. Implementing a documented media sanitization process that includes overriding data with a multi-pass algorithm, or using degaussing/physical destruction methods validated against recognized standards, with verification of successful sanitization. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with stringent data protection requirements, particularly concerning the disposal of sensitive information. The CISSP professional must navigate the complexities of data lifecycle management, ensuring that data is not only stored securely, but also rendered unrecoverable upon its obsolescence, thereby mitigating risks of data breaches and noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to select disposal methods that are both effective and economically viable, while adhering to legal and regulatory mandates. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of data security and compliance. By implementing a documented process that includes media sanitization techniques validated against industry standards and regulatory requirements, the organization ensures that data is irretrievably destroyed. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of unauthorized access to sensitive information, protects the organization's reputation, and avoids potential legal penalties and fines associated with data mishandling. Adherence to established standards like NIST SP 800-88 Rev. 1 provides a clear, defensible framework for media sanitization and disposal, aligning with the ethical obligation to protect data. An incorrect approach that relies solely on physical destruction without verification fails to meet the standard of secure disposal. While physical destruction can be effective, simply breaking media without confirming the destruction of all data fragments leaves room for potential data recovery by sophisticated adversaries, violating the principle of data minimization and secure disposal. This approach also likely fails to meet specific regulatory requirements that mandate verifiable data destruction. Another incorrect approach that involves overriding data once without using a multi-pass method or specialized software is insufficient for highly sensitive data. While single-pass overriding can obscure data, it may not be sufficient to prevent recovery using advanced forensic techniques. This method lacks the robust assurance required for secure disposal, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance and a breach of trust. Finally, an approach that outsources disposal to a vendor without due diligence or contractual guarantees regarding their sanitization methods is professionally negligent. This abdicates responsibility for data security and leaves the organization vulnerable to the vendor's potential failures. Without verification and clear contractual obligations, the organization cannot ensure that its data is being disposed of securely, risking significant legal and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the sensitivity and classification of the data to be disposed of. This should be followed by a thorough understanding of applicable legal and regulatory requirements, e.g., HIPAA, GDPR, PCI DSS, depending on the jurisdiction and data type. Next, evaluate available disposal methods, sanitization, destruction against these requirements and the data's sensitivity. Documenting the chosen method, the process, and the verification of successful disposal is crucial. Finally, regular review and auditing of disposal procedures ensure ongoing compliance and effectiveness. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates a critical vulnerability in a core business application that, if exploited, could lead to significant data exfiltration and service disruption. The application is currently undergoing a major upgrade scheduled for completion in 6 months, and the project manager expresses concern that addressing this vulnerability now would cause substantial delays and budget overruns, potentially jeopardizing the upgrade timeline. Project manager suggests deferring remediation until after the upgrade, arguing that the risk is low in the interim. What is the most appropriate course of action for the security professional? Option A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment to quantify the potential business impact of the vulnerability, present the findings and recommended remediation options, including the impact of deferral, to senior management for an informed risk acceptance or mitigation decision. Option B. Immediately implement a complex and costly patch for the vulnerability, overriding the project manager's concerns to ensure the system is secured without delay. Option C. Downplay the severity of the vulnerability in the report to management, highlighting only minor potential impacts to avoid causing alarm and disrupting the upgrade project. Option D. Advise senior management to ignore the vulnerability for now, as the upgrade is imminent and addressing it would be too disruptive to the business. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment to quantify the potential business impact of the vulnerability, present the findings and recommended remediation options, including the impact of deferral, to senior management for an informed risk acceptance or mitigation decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a classic ethical dilemma in risk management, where a security professional uncovers a significant vulnerability that could impact critical business operations. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to protect the organization with the potential disruption and cost associated with remediation, especially when faced with pressure from stakeholders who may prioritize short-term gains or avoid admitting fault. The professional must navigate this pressure while adhering to their ethical obligations and the organization's risk management framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk assessment and response. This aligns with the principles of the CISSP Common Body of Knowledge, CBK, which emphasizes a structured approach to risk management. Specifically, identifying the vulnerability, assessing its potential impact through a business impact analysis or similar methodology, and then developing a risk response plan are core tenets. The professional's duty is to provide accurate, unbiased information to enable informed decision-making by management. This includes clearly articulating the risks, potential consequences, and recommended mitigation strategies, allowing leadership to make a risk acceptance or mitigation decision based on business objectives and risk appetite. This approach upholds professional integrity and ensures that decisions are based on a comprehensive understanding of the threat landscape and its potential business impact, adhering to the ethical obligation to protect the organization's assets and information. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves downplaying the severity of the vulnerability to avoid immediate disruption or negative attention. This is a failure of professional responsibility and ethical conduct. It violates the CISSP principle of acting with integrity and honesty. By not accurately reporting the risk, the professional is failing to provide management with the necessary information to make informed decisions, potentially leading to a more severe incident later. This also contravenes the spirit of risk management, which is about proactive identification and mitigation, not avoidance of difficult conversations. Another incorrect approach is to immediately implement a costly and disruptive remediation without proper assessment or management approval. While seemingly proactive, this bypasses essential risk management processes. It fails to consider the business impact of the remediation itself, potentially causing more harm than good. It also undermines the authority of management to make strategic decisions about resource allocation and risk tolerance, and it may violate organizational policies regarding change management and incident response. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the vulnerability due to a lack of immediate perceived threat or pressure from a superior. This is a direct abdication of professional duty and an ethical failure. The CISSP-CBK stresses the importance of continuous monitoring and proactive risk identification. Ignoring a known vulnerability, regardless of perceived immediate threat, is negligent and exposes the organization to unnecessary risk. It also demonstrates a lack of commitment to the security posture of the organization and a failure to uphold the ethical obligation to protect information assets. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a structured decision-making process. First, ensure thorough documentation of the vulnerability and its potential impact. Second, consult the organization's established risk management framework and policies. Third, present the findings and recommended actions clearly and objectively to the appropriate management level, emphasizing the potential business impact. Fourth, be prepared to discuss and justify the recommendations, but ultimately defer the decision-making authority to management, while ensuring the decision and its rationale are documented. This process ensures accountability, transparency, and adherence to both professional ethics and organizational governance. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that an organization handling sensitive customer financial data needs to implement robust data security controls. The primary objectives are to prevent unauthorized access, ensure data confidentiality, and mitigate the risk of data breaches. Considering the regulatory landscape in the United States, which approach best addresses these objectives by integrating multiple layers of protection? Option A. Deploy full disk encryption on all servers and endpoints that store financial data, without implementing specific access controls for individual data elements. Option B. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, encrypt all sensitive data at rest and in transit, and deploy data loss prevention, DLP, solutions to monitor and block unauthorized data exfiltration. Option C. Utilize data masking techniques to obscure sensitive fields in all databases and reports, assuming this will prevent unauthorized access. Option D. Focus solely on implementing strong password policies and multi-factor authentication for all user accounts accessing the financial data. The correct answer is B. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, encrypt all sensitive data at rest and in transit, and deploy data loss prevention, DLP, solutions to monitor and block unauthorized data exfiltration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in data security, where an organization must balance the need for data accessibility for legitimate business functions, with the imperative to protect sensitive information from unauthorized disclosure or modification. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate combination of data security controls to meet these competing demands, while adhering to regulatory requirements. The professional must consider the specific nature of the data, the intended users, the threat landscape, and the legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. Implementing a layered approach that combines granular access controls, robust encryption for data at rest and in transit, and data loss prevention, DLP mechanisms represents best professional practice. Granular access controls ensure that only authorized individuals can access specific data elements based on the principle of least privilege. Encryption protects the confidentiality of data, making it unreadable to unauthorized parties even if access controls are bypassed. DLP solutions monitor and prevent the unauthorized exfiltration or misuse of sensitive data. This integrated strategy directly addresses the core requirements of data security and aligns with the principles of data protection mandated by regulations such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, in the U.S., which emphasizes safeguarding protected health information, through appropriate administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing only access controls while foundational is insufficient. It fails to protect data if access controls are misconfigured, bypassed, or if data is compromised through other means, e.g., insider threats not caught by access logs alone. This approach risks regulatory noncompliance with data breach notification requirements under laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, as a breach could occur without immediate detection or prevention. Relying solely on data masking without encryption or strong access controls is also inadequate. Data masking can obscure sensitive data for non-production environments or specific analytical purposes, but it does not prevent unauthorized access to the original, unmasked data in production systems. If the masked data itself is sensitive, or if the masking process is flawed, it offers limited protection. This could lead to violations of data privacy regulations that require robust protection of personal identifiable information, PI. Deploying only encryption without granular access controls, or DLP, is problematic. While encryption protects data confidentiality, it does not address authorization or prevent data from being misused or exfiltrated by authorized users who have access to the decrypted data. An authorized user with broad access could still leak sensitive information, and without DLP, this exfiltration might go undetected. This could violate regulations that mandate controls over data usage and prevent unauthorized disclosure. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, starting with a thorough data classification and risk assessment. This informs the selection and implementation of controls. The principle of defense in depth, where multiple layers of security are applied, is crucial. Regular review and testing of controls, coupled with ongoing security awareness training for personnel, are essential to maintain an effective data security posture and ensure compliance with relevant U.S. data protection laws and industry best practices. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates a strong desire to prioritize the recovery of the marketing department's customer relationship management (CRM) system due to its high visibility and direct customer interaction, even though a business impact analysis suggests that the finance department's transaction processing system has a longer potential downtime impact on regulatory compliance and financial stability. As a CISSP, what is the most appropriate approach to address this situation while ensuring regulatory compliance and effective business continuity? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the business impact analysis and risk assessment, and present the findings to all stakeholders, clearly articulating the recovery priorities based on regulatory requirements and potential business impact, advocating for the finance system's higher priority. Option B. Implement recovery solutions for both systems simultaneously using the most cost-effective technologies available, without further analysis of their specific recovery needs. Option C. Immediately prioritize the CRM system's recovery as requested by the stakeholders to maintain good interdepartmental relations and address the most vocal concerns. Option D. Focus solely on restoring all IT systems to their pre-incident state as quickly as possible, regardless of specific business function criticality or regulatory implications. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the business impact analysis and risk assessment, and present the findings to all stakeholders, clearly articulating the recovery priorities based on regulatory requirements and potential business impact, advocating for the finance system's higher priority. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business continuity and disaster recovery, balancing the need for robust planning with the practicalities of implementation and resource allocation. Stakeholders, representing different organizational interests, have varying perspectives on the criticality of certain recovery objectives. The challenge lies in synthesizing these diverse viewpoints into a cohesive and actionable plan that aligns with regulatory requirements and business imperatives, without succumbing to political pressure or overlooking critical dependencies. The CISSP professional must navigate these competing priorities to ensure the organization's resilience. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and data-driven process that prioritizes recovery efforts based on business impact analysis, BIA, and risk assessment, while ensuring compliance with relevant regulations. This approach emphasizes understanding the interdependencies between critical business functions and IT systems by focusing on the recovery time objective (RTO) and recovery point objective (RPO) for each critical function, and aligning these with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. The plan becomes realistic and effective. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and due care expected of information security professionals, ensuring that resources are allocated to address the most significant risks and meet compliance mandates. Incorrect approach is analysis. Prioritizing recovery based solely on the loudest stakeholder or the most visible system overlooks the fundamental principles of BCP/DRP. This approach is ethically flawed as it can lead to the neglect of critical, yet less vocal business functions, potentially causing significant financial or reputational damage. It also fails to meet regulatory requirements that mandate a comprehensive and risk-based approach to business continuity. Focusing exclusively on IT system recovery without considering the business processes they support is another significant failure. Regulations often mandate the continuity of business operations, not just the technical infrastructure. This approach can result in IT systems being restored, but unable to support the actual business functions, rendering the recovery effort ineffective and non-compliant. Implementing recovery solutions based on readily available or cheapest options, without a thorough BIA and risk assessment, is a direct violation of due care. This can lead to inadequate recovery capabilities for critical functions, exposing the organization to unacceptable risks and potential regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a failure to adequately protect organizational assets and operations. Professional reasoning. When faced with competing stakeholder demands in BCP/DRP, a CISSP professional should initiate a formal business impact analysis, BIA, to quantify the potential impact of disruptions on critical business functions. This analysis should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment to identify threats and vulnerabilities. The results of these analyses, combined with an understanding of regulatory requirements, e.g., Sarbanes-Oxley, HIPAA, GDPR, depending on the jurisdiction and industry, should form the basis for defining RTOs and RPOs. These objectives then guide the development of recovery strategies and the allocation of resources. Regular testing, review, and updates of the BCP/DRP are essential to ensure their continued effectiveness and compliance. Question 6. The control framework reveals a new cloud-based application is being developed, and the development team requires access to the production environment for testing and deployment. To expedite the launch, the project manager proposes granting all developers full administrative privileges to the production environment during the development and initial deployment phases, with the understanding that security configurations will be hardened after the application goes live. Which of the following approaches best aligns with established security design principles and regulatory expectations for secure system development? Option A. Focus solely on implementing strong encryption for all data at rest within the production environment, assuming that encrypted data is inherently secure regardless of access controls. Option B. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, granting developers only the specific permissions required for their tasks in the production environment, and establish robust logging and auditing mechanisms to track all actions. Option C. Grant all developers full administrative privileges to the production environment to facilitate rapid testing and deployment, with a plan to implement security hardening and access restrictions post-launch. Option D. Prioritize speed of deployment by allowing developers to operate with broad access, relying on post-deployment patching and vulnerability scanning to address security concerns as they arise. The correct answer is B. Implement granular access controls based on the principle of least privilege, granting developers only the specific permissions required for their tasks in the production environment, and establish robust logging and auditing mechanisms to track all actions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in information security, where the implementation of a new system requires careful consideration of fundamental security design principles to prevent unintended consequences and maintain a secure posture. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need for system functionality and user access with the imperative to uphold security best practices, specifically those related to least privilege, separation of duties, fail-safe defaults, and economy of mechanism. A hasty or incomplete implementation can introduce vulnerabilities, compromise data integrity, and lead to regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach, which involves a phased rollout with granular access controls and robust logging, represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core security design principles. Least privilege is enforced by granting only necessary permissions. Separation of duties is implicitly supported by ensuring that no single individual has excessive control over critical functions. Fail-safe defaults are maintained by ensuring that if the system fails, it does so in a secure state, preventing unauthorized access. Economy of mechanism is achieved by keeping the design as simple as possible, reducing the attack surface. This approach aligns with the overarching goal of the CISSP certification to ensure secure system design and operation, which is often a requirement under various regulatory frameworks that mandate risk management and data protection. An incorrect approach that grants broad administrative access to all developers during the initial phase represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly violates the principle of least privilege, exposing the system to a much higher risk of accidental or malicious compromise. This could lead to violations of data privacy regulations, e.g., if personal data is involved, and breach of contract clauses related to security. Granting such extensive access also undermines separation of duties, as developers could potentially alter system configurations or access sensitive data they are not authorized to see. Furthermore, it fails to adhere to fail-safe defaults, as a compromised developer account could lead to widespread system compromise rather than a controlled failure. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over security configuration, relying on post-deployment patching for security, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for proactive security design and a reliance on reactive measures. It fails to implement least privilege from the outset, potentially exposing sensitive data or functionalities. It also neglects the principle of fail-safe defaults, as the system is not inherently secure upon deployment. This approach can lead to significant regulatory noncompliance, particularly in environments with strict data protection laws that require security to be built in, not bolted on. A third incorrect approach that focuses solely on encrypting data at rest without considering access controls or system integrity is also flawed. While encryption is a critical security control, it is only one piece of the puzzle. Without least privilege, an authorized user with excessive permissions could still access and misuse the encrypted data. Without separation of duties, a single administrator could potentially bypass encryption controls or manipulate data. This approach fails to provide a holistic security posture and can lead to regulatory issues if the overall security framework is deemed insufficient, even if individual components like encryption are present. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential threats and vulnerabilities. Security design principles should be integrated into the system's architecture from the earliest stages. A phased implementation approach, starting with minimal privileges and gradually expanding access based on demonstrated need and successful security reviews, is crucial. Continuous monitoring, auditing, and regular security testing should be part of the ongoing operational lifecycle. Professionals must prioritize security by design, ensuring that compliance with relevant regulations and ethical obligations is a foundational element of any system deployment. Question 7. The audit findings indicate a significant data breach involving the personal information of customers located in both the European Union and California. The organization has a primary operational presence in the United States. The security team has identified the compromised data types, but a full root cause analysis is still in progress. The incident response plan mandates reporting to relevant authorities and affected individuals within specific timeframes. Which of the following approaches best aligns with legal and regulatory compliance requirements for this scenario? Option A. Issue a single, generic notification to all affected individuals globally, stating that a data breach has occurred, without detailing specific regulatory requirements or data types compromised. Option B. Immediately initiate reporting to the California Attorney General and affected California residents as per CCPA requirements, while concurrently engaging legal counsel to determine the specific GDPR notification obligations and timelines for EU data subjects and relevant supervisory authorities, ensuring all reporting is coordinated and compliant with both frameworks. Option C. Prioritize completing the full root cause analysis before any external reporting, as this will provide a more comprehensive understanding of the breach for all notifications. Option D. Focus solely on reporting to U.S. federal authorities and affected U.S. residents, assuming that compliance with U.S. regulations is sufficient given the organization's primary operational presence. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate reporting to the California Attorney General and affected California residents as per CCPA requirements, while concurrently engaging legal counsel to determine the specific GDPR notification obligations and timelines for EU data subjects and relevant supervisory authorities, ensuring all reporting is coordinated and compliant with both frameworks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in information security where a critical data breach has occurred, necessitating immediate and compliant reporting. The complexity arises from the need to balance rapid incident response with strict adherence to multiple, potentially overlapping data privacy regulations. Professionals must navigate the nuances of different reporting timelines, content requirements, and notification obligations across various jurisdictions, all while under significant pressure. The challenge lies in accurately identifying all applicable regulations, understanding their specific mandates, and executing the reporting process flawlessly to avoid further legal and reputational damage. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of all applicable data privacy regulations and their specific incident reporting requirements. This involves identifying the jurisdictions where affected individuals reside or where the data processing occurred, and then meticulously reviewing the mandates of each relevant regulation, e.g., GDPR, CCPA. The approach correctly emphasizes the need to determine the specific types of data compromised, the potential risk to individuals, and the precise notification timelines and content mandated by each regulation. By engaging legal counsel early and developing a coordinated, multi-jurisdictional reporting strategy, the organization demonstrates best professional practice. This ensures that all legal obligations are met, minimizing fines, lawsuits, and reputational harm, and upholding the ethical responsibility to protect individuals' data privacy. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely focusing on the reporting requirements of a single, familiar regulation, such as the CCPA, while neglecting others like GDPR. This is a significant regulatory failure because it leads to incomplete reporting, potentially violating the mandates of other applicable laws. Such an oversight can result in substantial fines, legal action from affected individuals in non-reported jurisdictions, and severe damage to the organization's reputation. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting the privacy rights of all individuals whose data was compromised. Another incorrect approach is to delay reporting until a complete root cause analysis is finished, even if it exceeds mandated reporting timelines. This is a critical regulatory failure, as most data privacy laws have strict deadlines for notification, often measured in hours or days, regardless of the completeness of the investigation. Exceeding these deadlines is a direct violation and can lead to maximum penalties. Ethically, it prioritizes internal processes over the immediate need to inform individuals about potential harm to their personal data, which is a breach of trust and responsibility. A third incorrect approach is to provide minimal, generic notification to all affected parties without tailoring it to the specific requirements of each applicable regulation or the nature of the data compromised. This is a regulatory failure because it likely does not meet the content requirements for specific notifications under laws like GDPR, which mandate detailed information about the breach, its consequences, and the steps taken. Ethically, it is insufficient and potentially misleading, failing to provide individuals with the necessary information to protect themselves from further harm. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with immediate containment and assessment of the breach. This is followed by a rapid identification of all potentially applicable legal and regulatory frameworks based on the location of affected individuals and data processing activities. Engaging legal counsel specializing in data privacy and international law is paramount. A risk-based approach should then be applied to determine the severity of the breach and the specific notification obligations under each identified regulation. Finally, a coordinated and compliant reporting strategy should be executed, ensuring all timelines and content requirements are met across all relevant jurisdictions. Question 8. The assessment process reveals that an organization has successfully implemented virtual machines for various business functions, but security controls appear to be primarily focused on the operating systems and applications within each VM. The security team is considering its next steps to enhance the overall security posture of this virtualized environment. Which of the following actions represents the most effective and comprehensive approach to addressing potential vulnerabilities in this scenario? Option A. Deploy advanced endpoint detection and response (EDR) solutions on all virtual machines and conduct regular vulnerability scans of the guest operating systems. Option B. Conduct extensive penetration testing against individual virtual machines to identify and remediate exploitable vulnerabilities within their guest operating systems. Option C. Focus on strengthening the perimeter security of the physical network infrastructure that hosts the virtualized environment and ensure all physical servers are patched. Option D. Implement robust hypervisor hardening, secure virtual network configurations with segmentation, and establish continuous monitoring of hypervisor and VM intercommunication traffic. The correct answer is D. Implement robust hypervisor hardening, secure virtual network configurations with segmentation, and establish continuous monitoring of hypervisor and VM intercommunication traffic. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a common challenge in modern IT environments: the security implications of a rapidly expanding virtualized infrastructure. The core difficulty lies in extending traditional security controls and monitoring mechanisms to a dynamic, software-defined environment where the lines between physical and virtual are blurred. This requires a nuanced understanding of hypervisor vulnerabilities, inter-VM communication, and the unique attack vectors present in virtualization. Professionals must balance the agility and cost-efficiency benefits of virtualization with robust security measures that address these specific risks. The correct approach emphasizes a layered security strategy specifically tailored for virtualization. This involves securing the hypervisor itself through regular patching, hardening, and access control, as well as implementing robust virtual network segmentation using technologies like microsegmentation and virtual firewalls. Furthermore, it necessitates continuous monitoring of VM activity and hypervisor logs for anomalous behavior, ensuring that security policies are consistently applied across the virtualized environment. This aligns with best practices for information security management, which mandate a risk-based approach and the implementation of appropriate technical and organizational controls to protect information assets. In the context of the CISSP exam, this approach reflects the domains of security architecture and engineering, and security operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on securing individual virtual machines without addressing the underlying hypervisor or inter-VM communication creates significant blind spots. This is a regulatory failure because it neglects a critical component of the attack surface, potentially violating principles of due diligence and defense in depth mandated by various information security standards and frameworks that CISSP candidates are expected to understand. Ethically, it represents a failure to adequately protect the organization's assets by leaving a known vulnerability unaddressed. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes network-level security for the physical infrastructure, while neglecting the virtual network and hypervisor security, is equally problematic. This is a regulatory failure, as it fails to account for the unique security perimeter of the virtualized environment, which can be bypassed through hypervisor exploits or compromised VM-to-VM communication. It also violates the principle of least privilege and segmentation within the virtualized space. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of comprehensive security understanding and an incomplete risk assessment. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on endpoint security solutions within VMs without considering the hypervisor's role in isolation or inter-VM traffic is also a significant oversight. This is a regulatory failure because it fails to address the foundational layer of virtualization security. Compromises at the hypervisor level can render all endpoint security ineffective. Ethically, it represents a superficial security posture that does not adequately address the inherent risks of the technology. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment that specifically considers the virtualization layer. This includes identifying critical assets, understanding the threat landscape for virtualized environments, and evaluating the effectiveness of existing controls. Professionals should then design and implement a defense-in-depth strategy that addresses the hypervisor, virtual networks, and individual VMs, ensuring continuous monitoring and regular security audits. This systematic approach, grounded in risk management principles and a deep understanding of the technology's security implications, is essential for maintaining a strong security posture. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a critical financial transaction processing system relies on Telnet for remote administrative access. This protocol transmits all data, including credentials and commands, in plain text, posing a significant security risk. The system handles sensitive customer financial data. What is the most appropriate course of action to mitigate this risk while ensuring continued system operability? Option A. Continue using Telnet but implement stricter access controls on the network segment. Option B. Block all Telnet traffic to the system immediately without providing an alternative. Option C. Implement SSH, Secure Shell, for remote administrative access to encrypt all communication. Option D. Upgrade the application to use HTTPS for its data transfer protocols. Correct answer is C. Implement SSH, Secure Shell, for remote administrative access to encrypt all communication. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in network security, where a critical business application relies on an outdated and potentially vulnerable protocol. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for application functionality with the imperative to maintain a secure environment, especially when dealing with sensitive data. The reliance on an unencrypted protocol like Telnet for administrative access to a system handling financial transactions introduces significant risks of data interception and unauthorized modification. The professional challenge is to identify and implement a secure alternative without disrupting critical business operations, while also adhering to industry best practices and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. Implementing SSH Secure Shell for administrative access is the best professional practice. SSH provides strong encryption for data in transit, ensuring confidentiality and integrity of administrative commands and credentials. This directly addresses the vulnerability of Telnet. From a regulatory perspective, many frameworks such as those governing financial services, e.g., PCI DSS, are not explicitly stated as the jurisdiction. The principles are universally applicable to sensitive data handling. Mandate the use of secure, encrypted communication channels for sensitive data and administrative access. By replacing Telnet with SSH, the organization significantly reduces its attack surface and aligns with the principle of least privilege and secure configuration, which are fundamental to information security. Incorrect approach is analysis. Continuing to use Telnet for administrative access is a direct violation of security best practices and likely contravenes regulatory requirements for protecting sensitive data. Telnet transmits all data, including usernames and passwords, in plain text, making it highly susceptible to eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle attacks. This failure to implement basic security controls for sensitive administrative functions is a significant ethical and professional lapse. Implementing a firewall rule to block Telnet access without providing an alternative secure method would disrupt critical business operations. While blocking an insecure protocol is a good step, doing so without a replacement strategy demonstrates poor planning and a lack of understanding of business continuity requirements. This approach fails to address the underlying need for administrative access, leading to operational failure rather than improved security. Upgrading the application to support HTTPS for its data transfer, while a good long-term goal, does not directly address the immediate vulnerability of administrative access via Telnet. HTTPS secures web traffic, but the administrative access in this scenario is likely through a command line interface, for which Telnet is being used. Focusing solely on application-level encryption without securing the administrative channel leaves a critical security gap. This approach misidentifies the primary vulnerability and fails to implement the most direct and effective solution for the stated problem. Professional reasoning. When faced with a situation involving an insecure protocol for critical administrative functions, a security professional should follow a structured approach. 1. Identify and assess the risk. Understand the specific vulnerabilities introduced by the insecure protocol and the potential impact on the organization. 2. Prioritize remediation. Determine the most critical vulnerabilities that need immediate attention. 3. Research and recommend secure alternatives. Identify protocols and technologies that provide equivalent functionality with robust security features. 4. Plan and implement the change. Develop a phased approach for implementing the secure alternative, considering business continuity and potential disruptions. 5. Test and validate. Ensure the new solution is functioning correctly and securely. 6. Document and monitor. Maintain records of the changes and continuously monitor for any new vulnerabilities. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive data classification and handling program requires significant upfront investment in technology and training. To optimize resource allocation while ensuring compliance with U.S. federal regulations concerning sensitive personal information, which approach to data classification and handling best aligns with a risk-based security strategy. Option A. Rely on generic industry best practices for data handling without a specific assessment of the organization's data types, regulatory obligations, or risk profile. Option B. Develop a tiered data classification scheme that assigns handling requirements, e.g., encryption, access controls, retention periods, based on the sensitivity, value, and regulatory impact of the data, and then implement controls proportionate to these classifications. Option C. Implement the most stringent data handling and security controls across all organizational data, regardless of its classification, to ensure maximum protection against all potential threats. Option D. Focus solely on minimizing immediate operational costs by adopting the simplest possible data classification and handling policies, deferring more complex controls until a security incident occurs. The correct answer is B. Develop a tiered data classification scheme that assigns handling requirements, e.g., encryption, access controls, retention periods, based on the sensitivity, value, and regulatory impact of the data, and then implement controls proportionate to these classifications. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the cost of implementing robust data classification and handling controls against the potential risks and regulatory compliance obligations. Organizations often face pressure to minimize expenses, but neglecting data security can lead to severe financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The CISSP professional must navigate these competing priorities, ensuring that security measures are not only effective, but also justifiable from a business perspective, aligning with the organization's risk appetite and legal responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a risk-based methodology that aligns data classification with the organization's specific regulatory environment and business objectives. This involves understanding the sensitivity of data, its value, and the potential impact of its compromise. By linking classification levels to specific handling requirements, e.g., encryption, access controls, retention periods, the organization can implement proportionate security controls. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of information security and data governance, ensuring compliance with relevant regulations, e.g., NIST frameworks for U.S.-based entities, GDPR for EU data, and protecting organizational assets. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible data stewardship. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that focuses solely on minimizing immediate costs without a thorough risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This can lead to underclassification of sensitive data, resulting in inadequate protection and potential breaches. Such a failure could violate regulatory requirements mandating specific data protection measures for certain data types, leading to fines and legal repercussions. An approach that implements overly stringent controls for all data, regardless of its classification, is also inefficient and professionally unsound. While seemingly secure, it can hinder operational efficiency, increase costs unnecessarily, and create user frustration, potentially leading to workarounds that undermine security. This approach fails to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of risk and resource allocation, which is a hallmark of professional security practice. An approach that relies on outdated or generic data handling policies without considering the evolving threat landscape or specific regulatory updates is a significant ethical and professional failure. This can leave the organization vulnerable to new attack vectors and non-compliant with current legal mandates, exposing it to significant risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic, risk-driven approach. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's business objectives and regulatory landscape. 2. Identifying and inventorying all data assets. 3. Developing a data classification scheme that reflects data sensitivity and value. 4. Defining clear handling, retention, and destruction policies for each classification level. 5. Conducting regular risk assessments to identify vulnerabilities and threats. 6. Implementing security controls commensurate with the identified risks and classification levels. 7. Establishing clear data ownership and accountability. 8. Regularly reviewing and updating policies and controls to adapt to changes in the threat environment and regulations. 9. Performing cost-benefit analyses to justify security investments and ensure efficient resource allocation. Question 11. Assessment of a CISSP ethical responsibility when faced with a business-critical project deadline that conflicts with the discovery of a potential, but not fully confirmed, security vulnerability in a proposed solution. The project team is pressuring the CISSP to approve the solution to avoid significant financial penalties for missing the deadline. The CISSP has identified that a full investigation and remediation of the potential vulnerability would likely cause a substantial delay, jeopardizing the deadline. Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the potential vulnerability, document all findings and potential impacts, consult with senior management and legal counsel regarding the risks and potential delays, and propose a phased implementation or alternative secure solutions that can meet the deadline. Option B. Refuse to approve the solution outright, citing the potential vulnerability, and inform management that the project cannot proceed until the vulnerability is fully understood and remediated, regardless of the deadline. Option C. Implement the proposed solution with a temporary workaround for the suspected vulnerability, without formal documentation or risk assessment, and hope that it is sufficient until a proper fix can be developed later. Option D. Approve the proposed solution immediately to meet the business deadline, assuming the potential vulnerability is minor and unlikely to be exploited, and address it in a future patch. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the potential vulnerability, document all findings and potential impacts, consult with senior management and legal counsel regarding the risks and potential delays, and propose a phased implementation or alternative secure solutions that can meet the deadline. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a perceived business imperative and the ethical obligations of a certified information systems security professional CISSP. The pressure to meet a deadline, coupled with the potential for significant financial repercussions, creates a situation where shortcuts might seem appealing. However, the CISSP Code of Ethics mandates a commitment to the safety and well-being of the public, the organization, and the profession. This includes acting with integrity, competence, and in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough and documented risk assessment, adherence to established security policies, and transparent communication with stakeholders. This aligns directly with the CISSP Code of Ethics, which emphasizes acting in the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders, and maintaining professional competence. By seeking expert consultation and ensuring all actions are properly authorized and documented, the professional upholds their duty of care and avoids compromising the integrity of the security posture. This methodical approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to responsible security management, which are foundational to professional conduct. An incorrect approach that involves implementing the proposed solution without a full risk assessment and proper authorization would represent a significant ethical failure. This bypasses critical due diligence, potentially exposing the organization to unforeseen vulnerabilities and risks. It violates the principle of acting with competence and due care, as it assumes the proposed solution is adequate without verification. Furthermore, it could lead to noncompliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations, depending on the nature of the system and data involved. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying the project indefinitely due to the perceived risk without exploring mitigation strategies or seeking alternative solutions, also falls short. A caution is important. An outright refusal to engage with the business need without attempting to find a secure path forward demonstrates a lack of problem-solving and professional responsibility. It fails to balance security needs with business objectives, which is a core tenet of effective information security management. A third incorrect approach, which might involve implementing a partial solution and hoping the risks are manageable, is also professionally unacceptable. This is a form of willful ignorance and a failure to uphold the duty of care. It creates a false sense of security while leaving known or suspected vulnerabilities unaddressed, directly contravening the ethical obligation to protect the organization's assets and data. The professional reasoning framework to employ in such situations involves a structured decision-making process. First, clearly identify the ethical dilemma and the conflicting pressures. Second, consult the relevant CISSP Code of Ethics and organizational policies. Third, conduct a thorough risk assessment, identifying potential threats, vulnerabilities, and impacts. Fourth, explore all feasible options, including mitigation strategies, alternative solutions, and the potential consequences of each. Fifth, seek expert advice and engage in open communication with relevant stakeholders, including management and legal counsel if necessary. Finally, document all decisions and the rationale behind them, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 12. Comparative studies suggest that organizations often face challenges in effectively implementing defense-in-depth strategies through network segmentation. A security team is tasked with enhancing the security posture of a growing enterprise network. They are considering several approaches to establish security zones and implement layered security. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of defense-in-depth and robust security zone implementation for a U.S.-based organization subject to general data protection and privacy regulations? Option A. Create numerous overlapping security zones with loosely defined and inconsistently enforced access control policies to accommodate rapid departmental growth. Option B. Define security zones primarily based on organizational departments, irrespective of the data they handle or the criticality of the systems they manage. Option C. Establish distinct security zones based on data sensitivity and system criticality, implementing granular access controls and layered security measures within each zone, and progressively expanding this segmentation. Option D. Deploy a single, high-capacity firewall at the network perimeter, and assume this single layer of defense is sufficient for all internal resources. Correct answer is C. Establish distinct security zones based on data sensitivity and system criticality, implementing granular access controls and layered security measures within each zone, and progressively expanding this segmentation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in securing complex IT environments. The core difficulty lies in translating theoretical security models like defense-in-depth and security zones into practical, effective controls within a real-world operational context. Organizations often struggle with the overhead of managing multiple layers of security, ensuring consistent policy enforcement across zones, and avoiding the creation of security gaps or overly restrictive access that hinders productivity. The challenge is amplified by the need to balance robust security with business agility and cost-effectiveness, all while adhering to regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased implementation of security zones, starting with the most critical assets and progressively expanding. This strategy aligns with best practices for defense-in-depth by creating distinct security perimeters around sensitive data and systems. By segmenting the network into zones e.g., DMZ, internal trusted, development, production, access controls can be granularly applied, limiting the blast radius of any potential breach. Implementing layered security within each zone, such as firewalls, intrusion detection/prevention systems, endpoint security, and access management, further reinforces protection. This approach is professionally sound because it systematically reduces the attack surface and enforces the principle of least privilege. From a regulatory perspective, this structured implementation helps demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive information, which is a common requirement across various compliance frameworks, e.g., NIST, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, HIPAA, depending on the specific industry and jurisdiction. Though for CISSP, the focus is on general principles applicable across U.S. frameworks. It allows for more effective monitoring and incident response by isolating issues to specific zones. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a single, monolithic firewall at the network edge without further segmentation is an incorrect approach. This fails to implement defense-in-depth effectively, as it relies on a single point of failure. A breach of this perimeter would grant attackers broad access to the entire internal network, violating the principle of layered security and significantly increasing the risk to all assets. Ethically and regulatorily, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting sensitive data, potentially leading to noncompliance with data protection regulations that mandate risk mitigation and layered controls. Deploying multiple, overlapping security zones with inconsistent access control policies is also incorrect. This creates confusion, administrative overhead, and critically, security gaps. If policies are not clearly defined and enforced across all zones, attackers can exploit the inconsistencies to move laterally between segments. This approach undermines the purpose of security zoning and defense-in-depth, leading to a false sense of security. It represents a failure in professional judgment and can lead to regulatory noncompliance due to inadequate security controls and potential data breaches. Implementing security zones solely based on departmental structures without considering data sensitivity or system criticality is another incorrect approach. While departmental separation can be a factor, it does not inherently provide robust security. A department handling highly sensitive customer data requires a more stringent security posture than one primarily dealing with internal administrative tasks, regardless of their organizational structure. This approach neglects the core principle of risk-based security and can lead to underprotection of critical assets, resulting in regulatory and ethical failures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach security model implementation by first conducting a thorough risk assessment to identify critical assets and potential threats. This assessment informs the design of security zones, prioritizing the protection of high-value targets. The implementation should be iterative, starting with foundational layers and progressively adding complexity and controls. Clear documentation of policies, procedures, and zone definitions is crucial for consistent enforcement and auditing. Regular review and testing of security controls, including penetration testing and vulnerability assessments, are essential to validate the effectiveness of the defense-in-depth strategy and identify areas for improvement. This systematic, risk-driven, and iterative approach ensures that security investments are aligned with business objectives and regulatory requirements, fostering a resilient security posture. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a significant number of information assets with varying levels of potential impact. To effectively manage these assets and their associated risks, which of the following approaches best aligns with CISSP best practices for asset management? Option A. Focus exclusively on establishing robust asset lifecycle management processes for all assets without explicitly linking them to the risk matrix or asset valuation. Option B. Classify all information assets at the highest sensitivity level to ensure maximum protection, even if a detailed valuation or risk assessment has not been completed for each. Option C. Implement a uniform high level of security controls for all identified information assets, regardless of their specific risk or valuation, to ensure comprehensive coverage. Option D. Prioritize asset security controls based on the criticality and potential impact identified in the risk matrix, ensuring that classification and valuation inform the lifecycle management of each asset. The correct answer is D. Prioritize asset security controls based on the criticality and potential impact identified in the risk matrix, ensuring that classification and valuation inform the lifecycle management of each asset. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in asset management, balancing the need for comprehensive asset identification and classification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the dynamic nature of information assets. The risk matrix, while a valuable tool, can become overwhelming if not properly contextualized with asset valuation and life cycle considerations. The core challenge lies in prioritizing security efforts effectively when faced with a large, diverse, and potentially unvalued set of assets. A CISSP professional must demonstrate the ability to move beyond simple inventory to a strategic understanding of asset criticality and its implications for risk management. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a risk-based strategy that aligns asset classification and valuation with the organization's overall security posture and business objectives. By prioritizing assets based on their criticality and potential impact, as indicated by the risk matrix, and then applying appropriate controls throughout their life cycle, security resources are deployed most effectively. This aligns with best practices in information security management, which advocate for a proactive and value-driven approach to asset protection. Specifically, it reflects the principles of CISSP 800-53, which mandates the identification, classification, and protection of information and information systems based on their criticality and impact. This approach ensures that the most sensitive and valuable assets receive the highest level of protection, thereby optimizing the return on security investments and minimizing the likelihood of significant business disruption or data breaches. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on the volume of assets without considering their valuation or risk exposure leads to inefficient resource allocation. Applying a uniform, high level of security to all assets, regardless of their criticality, is wasteful and can dilute the protection of truly high-value assets. This approach fails to acknowledge the principle of proportionality in security controls, which is a cornerstone of effective risk management. Ignoring the risk matrix entirely and focusing only on asset lifecycle management, while important, is insufficient. Without understanding the inherent risks associated with each asset, the lifecycle management efforts may not be adequately prioritized or tailored to address the most significant threats. This can lead to a false sense of security, where assets are managed but not necessarily protected against relevant risks. Classifying all assets at the highest sensitivity level without a clear valuation or risk assessment is an overreaction. While it might seem like a safe approach, it creates an unsustainable operational burden and can lead to alert fatigue and the desensitization of security personnel to genuine threats. This approach lacks the nuanced, risk-informed decision-making required for effective CISSP practice and can also lead to unnecessary compliance burdens without a corresponding increase in security. Professional reasoning. A CISSP professional should approach asset management by first understanding the business context and the organization's risk appetite. The process should begin with a comprehensive inventory, followed by a thorough classification and valuation of each asset, considering its confidentiality, integrity, and availability requirements. The risk matrix should then be used to assess the potential impact of threats against these valued assets. Security controls should be implemented and managed throughout the asset lifecycle, with a focus on those assets identified as high risk. Regular review and updates to the asset inventory, classification, valuation, and risk assessments are crucial to maintain an effective security posture in a constantly evolving threat landscape. This iterative, risk-based approach ensures that security efforts are aligned with business objectives and provide the greatest protection for the most critical information assets. Question 14. To address the challenge of isolating sensitive financial data servers from the general user network and preventing unauthorized access from guest Wi-Fi, while ensuring that only compliant devices can connect to the internal network, which of the following approaches best aligns with CISSP principles for network security? Option A. Utilize Network Access Control (NAC) to authenticate all users and devices, but do not implement any VLAN or subnets, allowing all authenticated devices to access any part of the network. Option B. Create separate physical network segments for the financial servers and guest Wi-Fi, and use a single, flat IP address scheme across the entire internal network. Rely on host-based firewalls on individual servers for protection. Option C. Implement VLAN to separate the financial servers and guest Wi-Fi into distinct broadcast domains. Configure subnets for each VLAN and implement firewall rules between subnets to restrict traffic flow. Deploy a Network Access Control (NAC) solution to authenticate and authorize all devices attempting to connect to the internal network, dynamically assigning them to appropriate VLAN based on their role and compliance status. Option D. Implement VLAN to separate the financial servers and guest Wi-Fi, and configure subnets for each VLAN. However, do not implement NAC, relying solely on static IP address assignments and firewall rules for access control. The correct answer is C. Implement VLAN to separate the financial servers and guest Wi-Fi into distinct broadcast domains. Configure subnets for each VLAN and implement firewall rules between subnets to restrict traffic flow. Deploy a Network Access Control (NAC) solution to authenticate and authorize all devices attempting to connect to the internal network, dynamically assigning them to appropriate VLAN based on their role and compliance status. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise network security, balancing the need for granular access control and threat containment with the operational demands of a dynamic IT environment. The core difficulty lies in implementing effective network segmentation without introducing undue complexity or hindering legitimate business operations. A robust solution requires a deep understanding of how different segmentation technologies interact and their implications for security policy enforcement. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it leverages multiple layers of network segmentation and access control, aligning with the principle of defense in depth. VLAN are used to logically separate traffic at Layer 2, reducing broadcast domains and isolating groups of devices. Subnetting further refines this segmentation at Layer 3, enabling more granular control over IP traffic flow and the application of firewall rules. Network Access Control (NAC) then acts as a critical enforcement point, verifying the security posture of devices before granting them access to network resources, and dynamically adjusting their access based on their role and compliance status. This multi-layered strategy is essential for meeting the security objectives of modern organizations and is implicitly supported by general information security, best practices and frameworks that emphasize least privilege and risk mitigation, which are foundational to CISSP principles. An incorrect approach that relies solely on VLAN without further subnetting or NAC would fail to provide adequate Layer 3 control and dynamic policy enforcement. This leaves the network vulnerable to lateral movement of threats within a subnet, even if it's a separate VLAN, as traffic between subnets within the same VLAN might not be subject to strict firewalling. This violates the principle of least privilege by potentially allowing broader access than necessary. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on subnetting without VLAN would miss the benefits of broadcast domain reduction at Layer 2, potentially leading to performance issues and making it harder to manage traffic flow for specific device groups. Furthermore, without NAC, the network lacks a mechanism to dynamically assess and enforce device compliance, leaving it open to compromised or non-compliant devices gaining access. This represents a failure in proactive security posture management. An approach that implements NAC without proper VLAN and subnet segmentation would be inefficient and less effective. NAC is most powerful when it can enforce policies on clearly defined network segments. Without underlying segmentation, NAC might struggle to manage access granularly, leading to overly broad policies or complex configurations that are difficult to maintain. This approach fails to leverage the foundational security benefits of network segmentation. The professional decision-making process for such situations involves a risk-based assessment. First, identify critical assets and sensitive data. Second, understand the network topology and traffic flows. Third, evaluate the capabilities and limitations of available security technologies, VLAN, subnets, NAC. Fourth, design a layered security architecture that applies controls at different network layers, adhering to the principle of least privilege and defense in depth. Finally, continuously monitor and adapt the security posture based on evolving threats and business requirements. Question 15. The audit findings indicate a critical vulnerability in the customer data management system that, if exploited, could lead to a significant breach of personally identifiable information, PI. The business operations team has expressed concerns that immediate patching or system isolation will severely disrupt ongoing customer service operations, potentially impacting revenue. The CISO must decide on the most appropriate course of action, adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks and CISSP security governance principles. Option A. Advise senior management to disregard the audit finding for the time being, citing the critical nature of ongoing customer service operations and the potential for revenue loss if systems are disrupted. Option B. Propose a complete shutdown of all systems that interact with the customer data management system until a permanent fix can be developed and deployed. Regardless of the immediate operational impact, Option C. Immediately implement a comprehensive remediation plan that includes patching and, if necessary, temporary system isolation, after conducting a rapid business impact assessment and engaging with key business stakeholders to define acceptable downtime windows and contingency measures. Option D. Delegate the decision-making authority for this vulnerability to the IT operations team, allowing them to manage the situation based on their day-to-day operational priorities without further CISO oversight. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement a comprehensive remediation plan that includes patching and, if necessary, temporary system isolation after conducting a rapid business impact assessment and engaging with key business stakeholders to define acceptable downtime windows and contingency measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in information security where a critical audit finding directly impacts business operations and regulatory compliance. The tension lies in balancing immediate operational needs with the imperative to address security vulnerabilities that could lead to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage. The CISO must navigate conflicting priorities, stakeholder expectations, and resource constraints while adhering to established governance principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the remediation of the identified vulnerability in alignment with business objectives and legal/regulatory compliance. This demonstrates a mature security governance posture where security is not an afterthought but an integral part of business strategy. By engaging stakeholders, assessing risk, and developing a remediation plan that considers business impact, the CISO ensures that security controls support rather than hinder organizational goals. This aligns with the CISSP principle of aligning security with business objectives and adhering to legal and regulatory requirements, such as those mandated by U.S. federal laws like HIPAA or SOX, depending on the industry, which require proactive risk management and data protection. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a blanket ban on all affected systems without a proper risk assessment or business impact analysis is a failure to align security with business objectives. It prioritizes security over operational continuity without justification, potentially causing undue disruption and financial loss. This approach neglects the principle of proportionality in security controls and can lead to resistance from business units. Ignoring the audit finding due to perceived operational inconvenience is a direct violation of legal and regulatory compliance obligations. It demonstrates a lack of accountability and a failure to uphold organizational policies and standards. This can expose the organization to significant penalties, legal action, and reputational damage, as regulatory frameworks mandate timely remediation of identified risks. Escalating the issue to senior management without providing a clear risk assessment and proposed remediation plan is an abdication of responsibility. While stakeholder engagement is crucial, presenting a problem without a solution or a structured approach to resolution indicates a lack of strategic thinking and governance. This approach fails to demonstrate leadership in security governance and can lead to inefficient decision-making. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach. First, thoroughly understand the audit finding and its implications. Second, assess the business impact and the likelihood and severity of potential threats. Third, consult with relevant business stakeholders to understand operational constraints and priorities. Fourth, develop a remediation plan that balances security requirements with business needs, considering cost-effectiveness and feasibility. Finally, communicate the plan and its rationale clearly to all stakeholders, including senior management, and secure necessary resources for implementation. This process ensures that security decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with the organization's overall strategy and compliance obligations. Question 16. Benchmark analysis indicates that an organization is evaluating its endpoint security strategy to enhance protection against a growing number of sophisticated cyber threats. The security team is considering different combinations of endpoint protection platforms, EP, endpoint detection and response EDR, and traditional antivirus/anti-malware solutions. Which approach offers the most comprehensive and effective defense against a broad spectrum of endpoint threats, considering both known and unknown attack vectors? Option A. Deploying only endpoint detection and response EDR capabilities without additional EPP or anti-malware layers. Option B. Implementing only endpoint protection platforms EP without incorporating endpoint detection and response EDR capabilities. Option C. Implementing a combination of endpoint protection platforms EP and endpoint detection and response EDR solutions, ensuring robust anti-malware capabilities are integrated. Option D. Relying exclusively on traditional antivirus/anti-malware software with frequent signature updates. The correct answer is C. Implementing a combination of endpoint protection platforms EP and endpoint detection and response EDR solutions, ensuring robust anti-malware capabilities are integrated. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in endpoint security, where an organization must select the most effective combination of technologies to protect against evolving threats. The difficulty lies in understanding the distinct capabilities and limitations of EPP, EDR, and traditional antivirus, and how they integrate to form a comprehensive defense strategy. Misjudging these capabilities can lead to significant security gaps, increased risk of compromise, and potential regulatory noncompliance if data protection mandates are not met. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing that endpoint protection platforms EP provide foundational, signature-based, and heuristic detection, while endpoint detection and response EDR offers advanced threat hunting, investigation, and remediation capabilities. Integrating both EPP and EDR alongside a robust anti-malware strategy creates a layered defense. EPP acts as the first line of defense, blocking known threats, while EDR provides visibility into suspicious activities that bypass EPP, enabling rapid response to novel or sophisticated attacks. This layered approach aligns with best practices for comprehensive endpoint security and supports the principle of defense in depth, which is often implicitly or explicitly required by various data protection regulations, e.g., NIST frameworks, which are foundational for many U.S.-based compliance standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing only EPP without EDR fails to address advanced persistent threats, APT, or zero-day exploits that may evade signature-based detection. This leaves the organization vulnerable to sophisticated attacks that EDR is designed to detect and respond to, potentially violating due diligence requirements for protecting sensitive data. Deploying only EDR without EPP or a strong anti-malware foundation is inefficient and potentially costly. EDR is resource-intensive and best utilized to investigate anomalies that have already passed initial defenses. Relying solely on EDR for all threat detection would overwhelm security teams and miss many common malware threats that EPP effectively handles. This approach could be seen as a failure to implement cost-effective and standard security controls. Focusing solely on traditional antivirus/anti-malware solutions, even if updated, is insufficient against modern threats. These solutions often lack the behavioral analysis, threat hunting, and automated response capabilities of EDR and the broader protection scope of EPP. This limited approach would likely fail to meet the reasonable security measures expected under most data protection regulations, leaving sensitive information inadequately protected. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach endpoint security selection by first understanding the organization's threat landscape, risk appetite, and regulatory obligations. Comparative analysis of EPP, EDR, and anti-malware capabilities is crucial. The decision should prioritize a layered security model that addresses both known and unknown threats, provides visibility, and enables rapid response. This involves evaluating how each technology complements the others and contributes to an overall robust security posture, ensuring compliance with relevant standards and regulations. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows that while network segmentation has been implemented to isolate sensitive servers, the organization continues to use HTTP for internal web applications and FTP for file transfers between departments. The security team is concerned about potential data exfiltration and compliance with data protection regulations. Which of the following actions best addresses these concerns while adhering to the specified regulatory framework? Option A. Disable all security features on the FTP servers to improve transfer speeds, as the data being transferred is considered low risk by departmental managers. Option B. Mandate the use of HTTPS for all internal web applications and enforce the use of SFTP or FTPS for all file transfers, while ensuring appropriate access controls are maintained. Option C. Rely on the existing network segmentation to prevent unauthorized access to sensitive servers, assuming data within the segmented network is sufficiently protected. Option D. Implement additional firewall rules to restrict access to FTP servers from external networks, while continuing to use HTTP for internal web applications. Correct answer is B. Mandate the use of HTTPS for all internal web applications and enforce the use of SFTP or FTPS for all file transfers, while ensuring appropriate access controls are maintained. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a common challenge in securing network communications, balancing the need for data integrity and confidentiality with the operational requirements of various protocols. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of how different network protocols function, their inherent security vulnerabilities, and the specific regulatory compliance landscape. A security professional must not only identify potential risks, but also propose solutions that are technically sound, operationally feasible, and legally defensible within the defined jurisdiction. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the most secure and compliant method for transmitting sensitive data. By enforcing HTTPS for all web traffic, it ensures that data is encrypted in transit, protecting it from eavesdropping and man-in-the-middle attacks. This aligns with general data protection principles and specific regulations that mandate the protection of personally identifiable information, PI, and other sensitive data. Furthermore, it addresses the inherent insecurity of unencrypted HTTP. An incorrect approach that relies solely on network segmentation without addressing protocol-level security is professionally unacceptable. While segmentation can limit the blast radius of a breach, It does not inherently secure the data itself if it's transmitted over insecure protocols like HTTP. This could lead to regulatory violations if sensitive data is exposed, as compliance frameworks often require encryption of data in transit. Another incorrect approach that involves disabling security features on FTP servers to improve performance is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. FTP is an inherently insecure protocol, transmitting data and credentials in plain text. Disabling any available security measures, such as FTPS or SFTP, exacerbates this risk, making it highly probable that sensitive information will be compromised. This directly contravenes data protection laws and ethical obligations to safeguard information. A professional reasoning process for this situation would involve 1. Identifying the sensitive data being transmitted and the protocols used. 2. Assessing the inherent security of each protocol and the risks associated with their current implementation. 3. Consulting the relevant regulatory framework for data protection and transmission requirements within the specified jurisdiction. 4. Evaluating potential mitigation strategies, considering technical feasibility, operational impact, and compliance. 5. Prioritizing solutions that offer the highest level of security and compliance, such as migrating to secure protocols or implementing robust encryption. 6. Documenting the risks, proposed solution, and the rationale behind the chosen approach, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 18. Consider a scenario where a recent security audit has identified known vulnerabilities in the organization's current WPA2 protected wireless network, specifically related to potential decryption of traffic. The audit report recommends immediate action to enhance wireless security. The IT security team is evaluating several options to address this finding. Option A. Disable wireless encryption entirely to avoid any protocol-specific vulnerabilities. Option B. Implement a robust rogue access point detection system and rely on user education for security awareness. Option C. Focus solely on strengthening WPA2 pre-shared keys and implementing network segmentation. Option D. Upgrade all wireless access points and client devices to support and utilize WPA3 encryption. The correct answer is D. Upgrade all wireless access points and client devices to support and utilize WPA3 encryption. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in wireless security, balancing the need for robust protection against evolving threats with the practicalities of network management and user experience. The emergence of new vulnerabilities, even in seemingly secure protocols like WPA2, necessitates a proactive and adaptive security posture. The difficulty lies in identifying the most effective and compliant response without causing undue disruption or introducing new risks. The CISSP professional must consider not only technical efficacy, but also the adherence to established security best practices and potential regulatory implications, even if not explicitly stated. As a baseline for due diligence, correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a layered security strategy and a systematic, evidence-based decision-making process. Upgrading to WPA3 is the most effective technical solution for mitigating known vulnerabilities in WPA2, such as the crack attack, and offers enhanced security features like protected management frames, PMF, and stronger encryption. This aligns with the principle of defense in depth and the ongoing need to maintain the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems. By choosing WPA3, the organization is proactively addressing a known security weakness, demonstrating due diligence in protecting sensitive data transmitted wirelessly. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining trust and meeting implicit expectations of robust security, even in the absence of specific mandates for WPA3 adoption. Incorrect approaches analysis. Disabling wireless encryption entirely is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. It directly violates the fundamental principles of data confidentiality and integrity, exposing all wireless traffic to unauthorized access and modification. This would be a gross negligence, potentially leading to breaches of sensitive information, which could have significant legal and financial repercussions under various data protection frameworks. Though specific U.S. regulations are not cited here, the principle of protecting data is universal. Implementing only rogue access point detection without addressing the underlying protocol vulnerability is insufficient. While detecting rogue APs is important, It does not mitigate the risks associated with compromised legitimate APs or the inherent weaknesses in WPA2. This approach fails to address the root cause of the vulnerability, leaving the network exposed to attacks that exploit the protocol itself. It represents a reactive rather than a proactive security measure, which is a failure in professional risk management. Relying solely on user education about wireless security risks, while a valuable component of a security program, is not a sufficient technical control. User education cannot prevent protocol-level attacks or compensate for inherent weaknesses in the encryption standard. It is a supplementary measure, not a primary defense against known vulnerabilities. This approach fails to implement necessary technical safeguards, leaving the network susceptible to exploitation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Threat identification, recognizing known vulnerabilities in WPA2. 2. Impact assessment, understanding the potential consequences of exploitation, data breaches, service disruption. 3. Control evaluation, assessing the effectiveness of available security protocols and tools. 4. Recommendation and implementation, selecting the most appropriate control, WPA3 upgrade, based on its ability to mitigate identified threats and align with security best practices. 5. Continuous monitoring, regularly reviewing security posture and adapting to new threats. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with the organization's security objectives and professional responsibilities. Question 19. The investigation demonstrates that a critical component of the organization's primary revenue-generating platform is experiencing intermittent failures. The IT security team has identified several potential root causes, but the business continuity team has not yet quantified the financial, operational, and reputational impact of a prolonged outage of this specific component on different business units. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate next step to effectively manage this risk? Option A. Initiate a full system rollback to a previous stable version without assessing the potential data loss or operational disruption caused by the rollback itself. Option B. Focus solely on patching the identified vulnerabilities in the component, assuming that technical remediation will automatically address all business risks. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive business impact analysis, BIA, to determine the criticality of the affected component and its dependencies, and to establish recovery objectives. Option D. Immediately implement a complex, multi-layered technical solution to prevent any further intermittent failures, regardless of cost or business impact. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement a complex, multi-layered technical solution to prevent any further intermittent failures, regardless of cost or business impact. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a critical need for a robust business impact analysis, BIA, to understand the cascading effects of a potential system failure. The challenge lies in quantifying the impact of a disruption across various business functions, considering not just direct financial losses, but also reputational damage, regulatory noncompliance, and operational paralysis. This requires a deep understanding of interdependencies between systems and business processes, and how a single point of failure can cripple the entire organization. The correct approach involves a comprehensive BIA that systematically identifies critical business functions, determines their recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, and quantifies the maximum tolerable downtime, MTD, for each. This aligns with the principles of risk management mandated by frameworks like NIST SP 800-30, which emphasizes understanding the potential impact of threats on organizational operations, assets, and individuals. A thorough BIA provides the foundational data for informed risk treatment decisions, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively to protect the most vital business processes. This approach represents best professional practice because it is data-driven, prioritizes business continuity, and directly supports compliance with regulatory requirements that mandate resilience and operational integrity. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the technical aspects of the system without considering the business context. For instance, prioritizing the recovery of a non-critical but technically complex system over a simpler but business-essential one would be a significant failure. This overlooks the core purpose of information security, which is to support business objectives. Ethically, it fails to protect the organization's stakeholders by not adequately safeguarding the functions that deliver value or meet legal obligations. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on anecdotal evidence or gut feelings rather than a structured assessment. This introduces bias and subjectivity, leading to misallocation of resources and an incomplete understanding of the true risks. Violates the professional obligation to conduct due diligence and make decisions based on objective analysis, as expected in any risk management process governed by professional standards. A further incorrect approach might be to assume that all systems have equal impact and require the same level of recovery effort. This one-size-fits-all mentality ignores the varying criticality of different business functions and the unique RTOS/RPOs they require. It leads to inefficient resource utilization and potentially leaves critical operations vulnerable for longer than acceptable, increasing the likelihood of severe business disruption and potential regulatory penalties for failing to maintain adequate business continuity. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with understanding the business context and objectives. This involves engaging with business stakeholders to identify critical functions and their dependencies. The next step is to conduct a thorough BIA, using established methodologies to quantify impacts and define recovery requirements. This data then informs the risk assessment and treatment phases, ensuring that security controls and business continuity plans are aligned with business priorities and regulatory mandates. Continuous monitoring and review are essential to adapt to changing business needs and threat landscapes. Question 20. Upon reviewing security logs, an incident response team detects unusual outbound network traffic from a database server containing customer information. The team quickly isolates the server to prevent further data exfiltration. What is the most appropriate next step to ensure compliance with privacy considerations? Option A. Focus on restoring the affected server to its last known good configuration and monitor network traffic for any recurrence of the suspicious activity. Option B. Inform senior management about the potential security incident and await their directive on how to proceed with any external communications. Option C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to determine the exact nature and scope of the compromised data, and consult with legal counsel to understand notification obligations under applicable privacy laws. Option D. Begin drafting a public statement to inform customers about a potential data breach, without first confirming the extent of the compromise. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a comprehensive forensic investigation to determine the exact nature and scope of the compromised data, and consult with legal counsel to understand notification obligations under applicable privacy laws. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in information security, balancing the need for timely incident response with the legal and ethical obligations surrounding data privacy. The professional challenge lies in accurately assessing the scope of a potential data breach, identifying the types of data involved, and determining the appropriate notification procedures under the relevant regulatory framework. Misjudging any of these aspects can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of customer trust. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough and compliant response. It involves immediate containment of the incident to prevent further data loss, followed by a detailed investigation to understand the nature and extent of the compromised data. Crucially, it includes consulting legal counsel to ensure all notification requirements under applicable privacy laws are met, considering factors like the type of PII affected and the jurisdiction of the data subjects. This aligns with best professional practices by demonstrating due diligence, adherence to legal mandates, and a commitment to protecting individuals' privacy rights. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on internal containment without promptly assessing the need for external notification fails to meet regulatory obligations. For instance, neglecting to consult legal counsel or delaying notification beyond statutory timelines can result in fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach might involve making assumptions about the data's sensitivity or the notification requirements without a proper investigation, leading to either over-notification, causing unnecessary alarm and resource strain, or under-notification, violating legal duties. Ethically, failing to inform affected individuals in a timely and accurate manner when their PII has been compromised is a breach of trust and professional responsibility. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with incident detection and containment. This is followed by a risk assessment to understand the potential impact on individuals and the organization. Legal and compliance teams must be engaged early to interpret regulatory requirements and guide the response. A clear communication plan, developed in consultation with legal counsel, should be established for internal stakeholders and, if necessary, external parties, including affected individuals and regulatory bodies. This systematic approach ensures that all legal, ethical, and operational considerations are addressed effectively.